It's already 29th May and the lockdown 4.0 is coming to an end. The next question is, will there be another lockdown as we approach the month of June? Already, the lockdown has taken a tremendous toll on the economic activity of India. To discuss more on the probability of another lockdown, today we have with us consulting editor Karan Bhasin. Hey Karan.
Hi, Tushar. Thanks for having me here.
Karan, the million-dollar question, do we need to have another lockdown?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think that lockdown has overstayed its welcome, and while it did have certain benefits, but I think after lockdown 2.0, there haven't been much marginal gains that we have made, and I think probably now would be a good time to really lift it across the country.
Karan, the lockdown has taken a tremendous toll on the economic activity. That doesn't need to be said. The hospitality industry, for instance, aviation, all of them have suffered. The railways have suffered. Everyone, small, medium, micro enterprises have suffered. But the next question people are asking, the very obvious sort of a question, is that in March, when we did not have more than 1,000 cases, the country went into complete lockdown as a precautionary measure. In the last few days, we've seen the number of cases rising every day. We are already at more than 1.5 lakh cases. We're in the top 10 countries by number of cases across the world. So people are really wondering, why go for an opening right now? Why not more extension of the lockdown? How do you address that concern?
Well, there are two issues over here. First is, of course, what were the benefits of the lockdown and what are the costs associated to it. So, a simple cost benefit analysis is usually the best and the simplest way to think about these things. Nobody said that lockdowns could probably, prevent COVID from spreading and that it would result in zero cases. I do not think that was the, thinking at the time. At least experts didn't think that. I know for a fact that they wouldn't have made those conclusions. So perhaps the idea was that you use this lockdown as a time to slow the spread of the disease and develop your infrastructure in different parts of the country to ensure that your healthcare capacity is well capable enough across the country to ensure that you can address when the number of cases increase. And I do think that to that extent, government did make a lot of investments which wouldn't have otherwise happened probably in 10 years if it weren't for this crisis in the healthcare sector. So a lot of that front loading had happened, and more than that, there was a lot of information uncertainty at that point in time, so we didn't know what exactly is it that we're dealing with. We don't have a proper line of treatment. We didn't know which drug would work. There were far too many unknowns. China, for instance, at that time had a very high death rate because they were underreporting their total cases. Uh, what happened as a consequence, and the same happened with even the data that we got later from Spain and Italy, is that people panicked and people thought that this is far more serious and far more fatal than what we know it to be. Just to give some stats, I think 99.9% of cases below 40 without comorbidities recover, and they recover without any problems. And even though India has a very high number of cases, you look at the number of cases as a percentage of the total population or as a percentage of total number of tests that we are doing, it's not as high. And when I look at the total number of severe cases per the total number of cases that have been confirmed in India, even that is very low. Now, why are they low? There is this debate that it could be because of BCG vaccine, it could be because of heat, etc. At the moment, we don't know why they are low, but we do know that it is for India. The severe cases are low, and what this really means is that perhaps by now we have adequate evidence to suggest that there is a middle ground where we can resume economic activity while also ensuring that the healthcare dimension of the COVID can be met. Case in point, there are viruses like HIV, etc. We've learned to live with them. And mind you, HIV does not have a cure per se. In this particular case, there are very promising treatments, including the hydrochloroquine sort of medicine, which has shown promising results, and there are other drugs as well which are showing promising results. So when I look at it from that point of view, I think the costs associated with a lockdown every successive day rise exponentially, but there's no benefit because we already have the data and we already have made those investments, so there's no point extending it further. And why the cost increase is precisely because when a company is shut, it faces fixed costs, and those fixed costs keep on increasing with every successive day of non-economic activity. And over a period of time, companies get closer to the shutdown point. because of high fixed costs and no income coming in. So this cash flow mismatch can result in bankruptcies, etc. Even though government has tried to address this problem, but no stimulus package could be adequate except for the opening up of the economy. I think at this moment, opening up of the economy is going to be a big sentiment booster, and I think that is precisely what is needed, given that we have already given a stimulus.
Karan, you made a point about finding a middle ground between living with the virus and opening up the economic activity. Now, let's assume that the center gives a go ahead for a complete opening up of the economy on June 1. What kind of leverage do you think the states or the local governments will have when it comes to dealing with the containment zones, dealing with hotspots? How the economic activity should revive? Given the economy of India is very interlinked, the supply chains from one state move to another, and we've seen resistance from states in terms of flights, in terms of trains. So, do you see that being a challenge for the opening up of the activity, the local governments, the state governments?
Absolutely, I think that's the biggest bottleneck that we have at the moment, and one of the reason is because state governments are by and large, sort of guaranteed a 14-15% increase in GST collections every year, which government compensates, which is in the GST constitutional amendment. So that creates a problem because states know that in any case they will get the GST money, even if they don't get their excise on petrol, etc. So that gives them some amount of cushion. So the biggest fiscal impact is actually on the central government and not on the states, and that sort of encourages states to look at the healthcare crisis and ignore the economic implications since it does not directly affect them. uh, and mind you, healthcare will definitely impact them, and it is a sort of also kind of political choice that these states are making. And you rightly said that supply chains are very interlinked, and we really need supply chains to repair themselves quickly, and they can repair only once they are opened up. Now, I'm not saying that open up the entire economy just as it was before COVID. That cannot happen. I mean, obviously, you need to have some social distancing regulations and rules, and you need to really enforce them, which comes down to state capacity to enforce them. But that's the thing, that is the only way forward, because the cost of not doing it is so high that I don't think as a country, especially as a developing country, we can afford it. So at some point, center would have to tell the states that it may not be in a position to really compensate, given this is a exceptional circumstance, and that we really need to open up the economy should they want compensation. It is going to be very difficult. It is going to be a big political mess, but that's what federal structure is. There are different interests, and they sort of bargain, and then there's an outcome. And I think states are bargaining for another round of lockdown with certain easing of restrictions, whereas I believe center should be more aggressive in pushing for uh, easing of restrictions across the board, while having some mandated social distancing measures, such as limiting public gatherings, and also some norms for hospitality industry, etc. So I think that's the way forward.
Karan, finally, there have been a lot of reports, a lot of projections about India's GDP being contracted for the current quarter and for the next. We could be staring at a full-blown recession for the first time in 40 years. Now, if we open up in June, what should the government really push for urgent economic revival? They've already sanctioned a lot of MSME capital generation, liquidity, and all those measures. But what should be the urgent steps the central government needs to take in collaboration with, let's say, the banking industry? How do you look at that?
Well, for starters, the first step has to be now opening up the economy. And as you rightly said, that what happens post that. So if we were to open in June, of course, we have lost 2 months of the quarter, which is of 3 months, which means that we are looking at 2 months of basically no economic activity in 60 to 70% of our economy. So obviously, we're going to contract in this quarter. And I mean, you cannot ignore it. But, you have to put things in perspective. You're contracting because you weren't working for 2 months. So yeah, so on the question regarding what the government should do, well, once we open up, that's when we will know where are the problems coming in, because we have government has announced a stimulus package, and a lot of it is dependent on the banking system, and banking system has been responding, even though it has been a bit slow. A major reason behind that is also because of the restrictions that are there in present, which have sort of uh, uh, curtailed the ability of banks to do valuation checks, etc. So once those restrictions are dealt with, then we will get a more accurate sense of situation of how the economy is functioning, where it is, whether it's back to the pre-COVID levels of 4.5, 5% growth, or whether it's even lower. And from there, we can take a more informed discussion, or a more informed discourse of the kind of sectors that will witness support, and what is the extent or quantum of support that the government needs to provide. Uh, So these are questions that can obviously be answered only once supply chains are recovered and only once the economy opens. I do hope that once the economy opens, there will be more regular monitoring of these things, and there could be some fine tuning of policies as we go along, because that is very much needed. And the sooner we open, the better it is, because we really need to minimize the costs associated with this pandemic. As I said, if 99.9% of those under 40 without comorbidities are basically, able to recover without any complications, then that in itself says that, for a young country like India, we shouldn't really be that paranoid about it. We need to obviously protect the elderly, which is why probably they should be restricted a lot more, and people with comorbidity should be advised to stay at home. But the young people of the country need to start going back to work. Like people like you and me should not have to wait to be able to get back to work, etc. Work from home also has its own limitations. I mean, let's not think that it can be a long-term solution in some industries, yes, but not for a lot of industries. And I think that's very important, because you also mentioned the point that we locked down early and now we are planning to open up. Well, the fact is that across the world, countries did lock down when there are lower number of cases, and they're opening up. US is opening up. I think most of the Republican states have opened up. Of course, Democrat states are still not very keen on opening, but that's their internal politics. It's like it's similar to India, right? The ruling party, if it encourages states to open, probably the states from the same party will open, but the rest won't. Similarly, UK, all those countries are gradually opening up, because they're realizing that a vaccine is not going to be here for the next 1 year or so. And can we really afford to be at home for this longer period of time? I don't think so. I think our economic system is not designed to handle this kind of shock, and we should not be delusional that governments will have the capacity to absorb a major part of it should this continue. And with that in mind, I think we need to really push for an opening up of the lockdown.
Right. Thank you for those elaborate insights, Karan. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much, Tushar, for having me.